Welcome. I'm Brian Brady, and this is the AI and K12 Education interview series that I am delighted to start. And this is the first episode. And we are running these interviews in prelude to the AI K12 Deeper Learning Summit in Anaheim, March 1st and 2nd. So some of the speakers and presenters from that summit are coming on early for an interview to preview some of their thoughts and ideas. So today I am delighted to have Rob Whiteman as my first guest for this interview series. Rob is the owner of the Better Future Advisors, a firm he founded upon retiring his full-time consulting career. Through this venture, he assists organizations in redesigning their operations to get the most out of automation and AI. Additionally, he lends his expertise to startups in the tech sector, mentoring them as they scale their organizations. He's also the author of an AI book, Artificially Human, Making Sense of Automation and AI. He was a big deal at McKinsey and Company for a long while, a partner who's consulting with a lot of firms on their AI strategies and use. And before that, you've done some other really interesting stuff, but I'll leave it there because that's the relevant info for today. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk to you. We talked a few weeks ago, and it was one of the most enlightening conversations I've had around AI in the past 6 months of studying it. So I'm excited to dive right into the deep end of the pool with you. So we're going to focus on K12 education first. And I am making you superintendent of a random school district with 20 schools, middle and high school, let's say. Let's leave out K5 for now. And you want to build an AI strategy for that district. How do you, as someone who's pretty knowledgeable about AI, think about going about creating an AI strategy and policy for a school district?
Good question. And I'm going to first caveat this by saying that I am not an education expert. I do know a lot about AI, but hopefully I can round these things and things that folks that are experts in education will find attractive. So, I think the first thing is just to accept the fact that this is not something where I would say you want to just come up with a perfect plan and then just implement. AI is advancing at a really rapid clip, trying to predict the future, even for those of us that are in the AI space, is almost impossible. It's very difficult to know what's going to happen 10 years from now, or even a month from now, forget about like 10 years from now. So I think the first thing I'd say is to really focus on not big transformational one-time things, but more of what are the things you can do kind of each day to build AI into the existing curricula and into the lesson plans that you're already using, and having that be the avenue through which you introduce AI. So not having it, for example, be a new class or a completely new way of teaching, saying, what do you already have and how do you begin to incorporate AI into that? So, an example would be, you mentioned, middle school or high school. Well, there's a lot of interesting research, for example, written at a collegiate level that could be really interesting to middle schoolers and high schoolers, but where it's not written for them. It's not entertaining. It's not their reading level. AI is really good at making those things accessible. And so you could, for example, upload a paper to Claude 2 or GPT-4 or one of these models and let the students talk to it and ask it questions and learn from that research, even though the research was never actually written for them. So, those are examples where I think you can weave it in. And then I think at a more system level, it's about saying, as you're weaving those things in, how are you providing access to the models, the hardware, the tools that teachers are going to need in order to adopt AI? So not focusing on what they're doing with it, but just making sure they have access to it and they have ways of introducing it into their classrooms, and then reinforcing those things that are working and really doubling down on them. So when you see practices that are working, really promoting those. When you have opportunities, for example, to send educators to conferences and things like that, do that and really lean into the fact that you get them in the flow, and it stops to become this big, intimidating, monumental thing you have to challenge that you have to take on, and it becomes just something that you think about every day and make small progress and small steps on every day.
It sounds like you're saying have a ground up strategy, which is what I'm seeing with some of the schools I'm working with, that there's just some teachers who are ahead of the curve and are implementing and innovating and doing some cool stuff. And so it seems like you're saying also just empower those folks and try to get them to share their practice. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yeah, and I also think the other thing is but I think it's a little bit less passive. I think that just waiting for 1,000 flowers to bloom and hoping for the best, I'm not sure will lead to the outcomes, especially in the timeline that you're going to need. So I do think there also needs to be a reframing of what the real risk is. There are certainly risks to adopting AI. I actually think the risks of not adopting AI are much, much greater. And so I think it's also a reframing of what is the potential risk of AI, and just putting a little bit more emphasis on the direction you want is innovation, and really making sure that you're pushing in a direction that's forward, as opposed to just passively waiting for things to happen.
I I think we can't. You said something pretty provocative there, so we got to drill down deeper there. The risks of not integrating AI are greater than the risks of banning it or not
Mhm.
allowing it. Give me your mental calculation there, Indy.
Yeah. Yeah, so there are two ways that I think about this. So one is that students that are in school right now, they're going to enter a labor market at some time in the future that is going to increasingly look very different than the labor market has historically. Historically, what you've had, we have close to 4 billion people in the world who are working, have jobs. Like, we run all of society on human labor. And even though it seems like we have a lot of technology today, on a relative basis, most of what we do is still, for the most part, manual, or has a very large kind of human labor component. Over time, the question I ask, I actually talk about this in my book: what does an economy look like that has 100 billion machines and 4 billion human workers? That looks very different than the world where we live today. And if you're unable to participate in that workforce in a way that really takes advantage of all that digital labor, machine labor, artificial intelligence, whatever term you want to put to it, if you can't take advantage of that, it puts you at a severe disadvantage. So I think, one is just making sure that students are prepared for the workforce that they're going to be entering in the future, and how that looks different. I think the second big thing for me is, there's some interesting research in the private sector about what introducing AI actually does in a group setting. And what you see is that it doesn't tend to enhance the performance of your existing top performers in private sector. This was done in call center. This was done in a consulting firm. What it does, though, is it significantly boosts the performance of people that are struggling most. And so I think if we're going to have a conversation about closing the achievement gap, both within schools and within districts, but also across districts, I think AI is one of the few things I've seen that offers a lot of promise for being able to do that effectively, if what we're seeing in the private sector translates to the social sector.
Just anecdotally, I see second language learners who struggle with writing using Chat GPT to proofread their work or help them get started on an outline, and it's an amazing boost for them. What are your recommendations for the nitty gritty here? Is when is it appropriate for a student or a teacher? Let's use English class for a writing assignment. I know you're not an educator, but what would you think would be the right parameters for an English teacher to set on a research paper, for example?
Yeah, so this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult for me, just because I don't necessarily have a background in the learning process, and psychology of and the neuroscience of how children learn over time. But I my view on that is, I think providing access to the tools, I think at a base level, that overall is just a good thing, mainly because, to what I just said, it tends to benefit the students that are struggling most, and
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily lead to sharp drop offs in the students that are performing. Now, the question is, at some point, does introducing the technologies too early circumvent the learning process such that the students don't learn the core concepts? So you mentioned about like writing a report. Well, if I don't learn how to do research, if I don't learn how to fact check, if I don't learn how to synthesize, if I don't learn how to produce new and novel insights, well, if I don't learn how to do those things and it's just the machine doing it, how, am I going to be at a disadvantage at some point in the future? And so that's the part that I think is a little unknown. I think the way that I would likely handle it is to really think about give the students access to the tools, but then modify a little bit how you interpret their and grade or evaluate the results. So evaluating on the basis of uniqueness and evaluating on things that frankly the AI is not very good at. I think some of those things can give you the opportunity to still reward those students that do have the ability to go above and beyond what the AI is able to do. But at the same time, you're able to kind of be able to reward the students that are really trying hard, but for whatever reason, either start out behind, have some other thing going on in their life that makes it so that they can't do the things at the same level. It at least puts them on a trajectory to be able to have skills that when they graduate are going to be valuable and help them earn a really decent living and not feel like they're just constantly behind and never able to catch up.
Yeah, I'm excited for our AI summit in March because we will have a lot of English teachers who've been experimenting, and this to me feels a little bit like the trial and error. We had to integrate the internet and Google and all these other tools into our educational process and have figured it out. But it's taken some time, right? And we're still trying to figure out if kids should have phones in school. That's still a very hot button issue. Um, you, One question I wanted to throw your way is, and this is a little bit more the domain of educational activists, is a lot of us have been sort of working to transform the educational system from a mid 20th century or even early 20th century educational model to a 21st century educational model with different types of assessments, more student-centered learning, more interactivity, more whole child approaches, and not the factory model of education. It almost feels with AI that we need to go from mid 20th century to mid 21st century and start to really think. We need to shed those habits fast and really think farther ahead about where, as you said, 100 billion AI machine learning tools with 4 billion workers. How, if I know you're not an education person, but you've worked with companies around the world, and in the end, we're trying to develop good citizens and good workers who can sustain themselves. How would you develop a school system that could train for the jobs of 2030, 2040, and 2050?
Yeah. So I think there are a few things that if I just look at what's happening right now in corporations and work my way back to the nature of the skill sets, there's a few common themes that I think start to emerge. So one is this idea of multidisciplinary learning and being able to tie together concepts across multiple domains. That increasingly is becoming more and more valuable. If you look at how many of the educational paths historically have evolved, they've evolved on the basis of specialization. And the longer that you stay in school, then the longer that, say, you go ultimately to get your PhD. When you do your PhD, ultimately you are at the kind of pinnacle of specialization. You are the deepest person in whatever your specific area of study is at that time. And what I'm seeing, at least in the private sector, is each individual narrow aspect of any domain is where the machines are gaining a lot of ground. Where today there's a gap is being able to kind of string those things together. So if I think about how do you tie together artificial intelligence, neuroscience, psychology, sociology, economics, those are disciplines that in large part have kind of grown up somewhat independently without a lot of kind of pollination across them, but they're all somewhat related to how people make decisions and how people think and how you blend those together. So I think first thing is that multidisciplinary learning and starting to merge some of these things so that they're not individual paths. It is a much more kind of integrated path. especially as you stay in the system longer. I think, that's one thing that's important, not having it narrow the longer that you stay in the system. I think the second thing is, and this is one that, I'm sure other people will disagree with this, but I do think we just have a gap right now in the languages that we're teaching students. And what I mean by languages is, in a world that's powered by human labor, being able to speak multiple human languages is a massive asset. It lets you access knowledge and culture and things that you wouldn't be able to access in the same ways if you weren't able to speak that language, and if you weren't able to work with people that speak that language. I think over time, that same thing is also true of machines. If you don't speak machine language, if you can't do some basic programming, some basic coding, ultimately you end up being a consumer of AI, but not necessarily a creator and builder, and somebody that can take those 100 billion machine workers and have them support you in your own career and be able to earn a living off of not just your work, but also the work of the machines that are supporting you. And so I think that language piece is another big piece. In addition, kind of the range is a piece that I would really focus in on heavily.
Oh, interesting. I'm not a techie, so but I am really good at searching Google for things.
Yeah.
I've never learned to code. In some ways, I slightly disagree with what you're saying, because I'm already using an LMS ChatGPT pretty heavily in my consulting, and I think people who are not using LLM, I said LMS, LLMs, right? Large language models, uh, are really going to fall behind productivity wise with people they're competing with. But I don't think I need to learn how to code, or need to know too much about what's behind that LLM. But you're saying I should.
Yeah, and the differentiation I would say there is, right now what you're able to do is consume the products that others have built, and you're able to benefit from them. You're able to make use of them in your job. The challenge is that those products are available to everybody, and over time, yes, there's going to be adoption delays, and you are an early adopter relative to maybe some other people, but ultimately, these are adoption S curves, and they do start to flatten out over time. Just like today, having access to a calculator isn't really an advantage relative to everybody else. But the people that adopted calculators first probably did have a big advantage relative to others. So, I think I think about that as consuming the products that others build. The difference here that I'm saying is building your own things. So you have a problem that you want to solve, and can you stitch together multiple machines to solve that problem? A really trivial example is, I mentioned the research paper one, and this was a big problem of mine. I want to keep up on AI research, but there's dozens of papers produced every single day, and I can't read 30 pages, 30-page paper, 10 times a day, and do it every day and do anything else with my life. So with some fairly basic programming and help from ChatGPT, I could write code that takes those research papers, puts them into entertaining podcast transcripts, and then pushes that to a podcast feed that I can listen to on my commute. It is not a lot of lines of code. It's a couple hundred lines of code. ChatGPT did the first pass of a lot of it, but I need to know, how do I link together what ChatGPT gives me? How do I host it on a server? How do I integrate it with the SQL database to house the episodes? How do I integrate it with the podcast hosting site? Like, those are things where I am a terrible programmer by any IT person standards, but having some proficiency in computer language allows me to make my own stuff that then has value and puts me in a position to capitalize on that.
Oh, that's super cool. What's the name of that website? Can we all access it?
Yeah, it's called Paper to Podcast.
Paper to Podcast.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that up on the screen so that people see it. So you're saying that there's a whole nother level of literacy when if you can see behind and know some code. Give me the last part of this segment is, define for me what an AI literate 18-year-old, I'm just saying senior in high school, would look like in your mind. What would you like for your own child to have at age 18 in terms of AI literacy?
Yeah. So I have a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old. So this hits home. So there's a few things. I think Number one is just having general awareness of what the tools are and what's available out there. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody that hasn't heard of Chat GPT, but then you start going down the list, and if I start throwing out things like Claude 2, 11 Labs, these types of companies that build other AI tools, those are things that are accessible. They're not very expensive, or in many cases, they're free. And so first thing is just an awareness of what the landscape is, what the tools do, what they're good at, what they're not good at. That's kind of first thing. Second thing is I think I mentioned the language piece, so I'm not going to kind of come back to that, but having some proficiency in a computer language, frankly, doesn't matter what it is. All the languages build on each other, but some proficiency in a language that machines speak. And, just like whether you take Spanish, you take French, or you take, Mandarin, it doesn't matter what language you study. Learning a language human language is valuable. Learning machine language is valuable. So that's the second thing. And then, the third thing I'd say is, a focus less on being the best and more on being the only. And that's something that I think is really important, is that, look, part of the one implication of AI is you're just not going to be able to outrun the machines and outcompete them in a very narrow area. It's just going to be really hard. And I think we've become too obsessed with being the best in our field or the best person in this thing. And frankly, it's going to be really demoralizing if what you're trying to do is be the best in a very narrow area. It's going to constantly feel like you're fending off the machines. I think the question is, what's unique about you? What are you the only person that's capable of doing? I think finding that in yourself, and at least having an idea when you get to 18, you don't have to have that question answered, but having a sense of what's unique to you and how can you use that throughout your life. I think that's going to just be really important.
Oh, fascinating. What is your unique profile and talents? We would call that superpowers in my, what are your superpowers that you bring to the table? This has been fabulous. I'm going to just add real quick the book that you've written. So if people want to learn a little bit more from Rob and can't make it out to Anaheim for on March 1st and 2nd for our AI K12 Deeper Learning Summit, I recommend you buy Artificially Human: Making Sense of Automation and AI, and go to the website Paper to Podcast. Thank you so much, Rob. We'll come back in a second segment and talk a little bit more about AI for the social good. But appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We are here for our second segment with Rob Whiteman, the founder of Better Future Advisors and a former partner at McKinsey and Company. I wouldn't call you an AI guru. That's too heavy of a title, but pretty knowledgeable about AI in multiple forms. So thanks again for joining today. What I'd love to dive into in this segment is, in my sector, Rob, as I've told you, there tends to be a lot of fight and flight going on with AI. And by that, I mean, when the topic comes up, people immediately move to algorithmic bias and deepening injustice and inequity making our society less healthy, because technology has definitely brought a mixed bag of things to us over time. And so everybody's feelings about technology just come to the fore, and about society in general. You and I talked. I think that folks in my sector, the social impact sector, the nonprofit sector, could use AI to advance their impacts and help people, and not discounting the negative that could happen and is happening with AI today in some areas. But I want to explore that potential benefits for social good with you. Can you give me your what you've seen over the past 5-10 years of being working with AI, and where you think nonprofits and social impact leaders can utilize AI to advance their mission?
Yeah. So I think, just starting out, I would say one of the things that's actually very challenging about AI is it has such broad and general applicability. It's often just hard to even know kind of where do you start. And I think that's also why the challenge of, how do you, or when do you, or do you period adopt AI? It's just, it's a hard problem to wrestle with, because just getting your arms around it in so many different facets, it's just, it's daunting. But I think there's a few things that, on a social sector basis can be really important. And the first thing is that I look at it and say, there's a big opportunity here to help a lot of folks in society for whatever reason are starting from behind, or they're starting at a disadvantage. So if I grow up in a place, that maybe doesn't have as much access to economic means, or I grow up in a household where my physical or psychological security is constantly under threat, it's very difficult to kind of play the game of life starting from a place where you're like 10 spaces behind and then expected to catch up in a period of time. So I think one of the biggest benefits of AI is it is augmented intelligence, and it's fairly inexpensive. And so really focusing on access and saying, how do we get people access to all the things they need to make use of this fairly low cost intelligence to be able to use it for themselves. And that is everything from broadband access to hardware to be able to run the things, to that underlying models, to the language capabilities to be able to write things, giving people access to the tools that they need for AI, and then allowing them to be able to determine how it gets used. I think that is, number one for me, is focusing less on how people are using AI and more about, are you making sure access is widely distributed, not concentrated in the hands of the few. I think from there, then there's a lot of potential benefits to broad-based access, one of which is disruption. Look, a lot of the institutions that we built up in society, both in the private sector as well as the public and social sector, those institutions inherently create certain barriers for other people to be able to break into those institutions. Well, we know AI is going to disrupt a lot of existing institutions, and to the extent that we can make sure that disruption is evenly distributed and looks a little bit more even in society, I think that's a benefit. And that again ties back to the access point. So I think I'm not giving you like three things I think we should do in society, but I think really focusing less on the use cases and more on providing equitable access to AI. I think that is where I would probably put most of my energy.
That makes a lot of sense, because it will have I think they're calling this the possible second or third digital divide that we might be creating. And as a sort of an amateur political analysis, I've also seen the aggregation of power through tech innovations and tech wealth, right? The invention of the internet and et cetera has brought a whole new set of billionaires and power companies to the table, who tend not to come from marginalized groups. They've come from groups that have pretty good access to schools and to technology and to investment opportunities, right? So it seems like you're saying, if we can avoid that other digital divide and create access points, there is a chance for better equity and equality and use.
Yeah. And just one other follow-up on that is I'm not sure that you can truly avoid the concentration of wealth and power in some of the technology firms just by nature of what they're building. It does require massive scale, requires massive amount of capital. Where you can, though, is create more equity in like how those platforms are used. And for me, one of the big examples of that is the creator economy. If I look at the diversity of the creator economy and who's making money in content creation today versus traditional media companies, and who was making money from content creation historically, that gives me at least some hope that providing broad-based access, even though the platform owners may accumulate a disproportionate amount of share, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of opportunity to be created and have that be more widely evenly distributed than perhaps it has been historically.
Yeah, it seems like I hear the term democratizing technology, right? That getting we got the smartphones down to a price point that almost everybody can have one, right? That there's a democratizing element to that. And it does seem like a pretty it does for the amateur person like myself, it does seem like ChatGPT a year ago, and last November I think it came out, was one of those moments where regular people like me kind of woke up and started to think about AI. Did you see it? I mean, you've been in this for 10 plus years. Were you surprised at that reaction to Chat GPT and regular people kind of waking up to its potential?
Uh, yes and no. So, there were versions of the underlying model. So there was a GPT-2 before there was a GPT-3.
Yes.
There were models that existed before that. The thing that I would say even it surprised me and a lot of people in the field is just all ChatGPT is essentially a website on top of a language model that had already existed. So if you knew programming and you knew how to use what's called the API, you could use the model before ChatGPT existed. And many of us that knew some programming have been playing around with these models before that. But then the minute you put a website on it, it's 100 million people using it. So I think that, kind of going back to the point I was making around access, that is the thing, is the power of access, making that model accessible to 100 million people and not just a few 100,000 maybe programmers is the thing that really caused it to both jump in popularity and enter the public consciousness. So I think it does speak to just the ability to make things accessible to people regardless of kind of their technology proficiency.
The UX matters, right? And that design of ChatGPT and the marketing just hit perfectly. Makes me think of Steve Jobs and the iPhone, right? Realizing how to get people to consume that product. Uh, I want to get to the problem solving potential of AI because, in the end, I'm in this sector because I see a lot of problems in society that I'd like to see improved. Um, and I'm fascinated by AI because it's like a coworker, an imbalanced coworker, and when I'm using the LMS, the Chat GPT, but it's amazingly fast, and it gives me some templates and some ideas really quickly. And I'm sure the technologies are just going to get exponentially better. And so being in this problem solving business, whether it's climate change, whether it's social inequity, whether you name the problem, how do you see social activists harness what I'm going to be a little more specific in this question. What tools right now do you think social activists should be using to push forward their advocacy on issues to help solve problems affecting the planet today?
Yeah. So I think there are two things that immediately come to mind. One is the ability to take things that I would say are a little are either hidden from public view or very difficult for the average person to engage on, and making those more accessible to people. So if you think about examples would be like public comment to regulatory agencies. Every time that something is being done in the banking sector, communication sector, energy sector, there's always public comment and there's things that are happening in order to shape legislation on those topics. Candidly, most of us just have zero involvement in that and aren't really engaged, and we don't really even engage until the legislation either gets passed, doesn't get passed, or something happens or something changes. I think figuring out how you use some of these AI tools to both present that information in ways that is intuitive, get it pushed out so that people are aware what's happening, and also just curate it so that it's not just an overload of just information getting pushed out into the void. I think doing that could bring more people into the process of how decisions get made earlier, and as opposed to fighting the decisions after they're already in place, actually getting people a bit more involved and engaged in the decision making process so we get outcomes that are more reflective of what the general consensus is around these issues. And I'm not sure we've always received that. um I think the second thing is that the I think just purely adopting AI at the same rate as the private sector or others that are using it for commercial interests or business interests or other things. One is just being there and being even in the conversation. So what I mean by that is, today, if I run a company that produces large language models, or I produce some sort of AI, if all of my customers and all of my demand and everything is coming from the private sector, inherently that is going to dictate the overall trajectory of the product, how the technology is developed, how it gets used. I think one of the biggest things is anybody that's interested in social issues, just taking and applying the technology in your area, so that not only do you get the benefits of the technology, but you also get a seat at the table as a customer and a user of the technology. I think that puts you in a much better place to shift where those technologies, or at least nudge where those technologies are going, as opposed to, I think if you're on the outside looking in, it's a very difficult prospect to then be able to influence decisions that get made about the future of AI.
So inclusivity, simplicity, getting a seat at the table. Seems like there you see a lot of potential benefits. I know one superintendent I work with is trying to take all the sticky notes when they do community conversations with parents and stakeholders. They get like 20,000 sticky notes of suggestions. And so he's pumping that all into an AI system in order to synthesize the results. Whereas usually they never get synthesized. So you're kind of going by gut feel of what the community said, because the synthesis job is massive inside the bureaucracy. But that's fascinating to me. I'm hoping, my hope is that folks in my sector get engaged and start experimenting with AI in their job. We're a little bit, Rob, we're a little bit traumatized by some tech sector wealth coming. We have to, ask for money a lot of times, and with money usually comes strings. So I know I'll just speak for myself. I've had a lot of folks who made some money in tech come to me with their social solutions that were pretty bad, that often hinged on, hey, if every kid would just do my app or this app, they would suddenly, we'd solve, massive problems. So I think there's a skepticism born of experience of the tech sector. But for me, I'm also getting over that, because I think these tools are massively powerful, and this is a kind of a Prometheus moment. But have you had any of those experiences yourself?
Not just experiences. I catch myself doing that sometimes. My oldest daughter actually is helpful in this respect. She taught me about the Dunning-Kruger effect, and the fact that you tend to be overconfident when you understand the least about an issue, and I think many people just studying like what the Dunning-Kruger effect is and how it applies to your own life. I think all of us would be better off knowing about that and being aware of it. So I do experience that. And, I think that it is coming from, in many cases, a good place, which is, people want to see institutions succeed. They want to see educational institutions succeed. They want to see a lot of social sector organizations succeed. So a lot of it is coming from a good place. I think it is what causes the tension is either lack of understanding, both a lack of understanding and a lack of willingness to learn about how those institutions were created, why they were created in that way, and how they operate. And so kind of instead of meeting in the middle of, hey, here's where we're starting, here's where we want to go, how do we figure out a path there? There's a tendency to just want to jump to the final, the final path. So I think, in those cases, the only thing I would say is starting from a basis of, hey, I want to help, here's what I know, here's what I have to offer, and then having others kind of guide you on where to focus, as opposed to coming in saying I have the answer. I think all of us would be better off if that's the path that folks took that were coming from the tech side.
I love that advice. Yeah, and I love the Dunning-Kruger reference, one of my favorite sociological theories. Very apropos there. Last question is, it was Marshall McLuhan who said the medium is the message, right? I think I'm paraphrasing a little there, but as Google and other things have changed our brains, right? The technology, the radio, the TV, all these technologies around us are not neutral in how they interact with us. I think personally, I'm stupid. I'm smarter and more stupid than I used to be because of technology. What's your advice as someone who's been in the AI piece? Where can it make us smarter, and where should we be a little more cautious?
Yeah. So I'll say one thing just really quickly that's related to what you just asked, but I think is an important point, and then I'll get to kind of the broader thought on that. So the one thing that comes up all the time in AI context is around bias and the fact that algorithms are biased, and we have to be careful around AI bias. You saw, the White House, the AI Bill of Rights, and some of the executive orders around AI. Um, I spend a lot of time in the private sector building algorithms. One thing you start to learn is the algorithms take on the bias of the institution, that it's exhibited historically. And one of the most concerning things to me is saying, well, we don't want to adopt the algorithms because they're biased. Well, inherently what you're doing then is you're just reverting to your old manual process, where instead of the bias being explicit in a way you could actually adjust for it over time like it would be in an algorithm, you just revert back to the implicit bias that was just hidden from view. And so I think the first thing I would just say is that's somewhat tangential to the question that you asked, but you mentioned bias earlier on, and I think that's an
Yeah.
important framing for the conversation on AI bias. um, More broadly, I have a book, Artificially Human, and my favorite chapter in that book that I wrote was one that I called like Us. And what that chapter is we spend a lot of time looking at how machines are becoming more like humans. It's okay, well, language models can now create stories or do analysis and do these things that humans could only do even 5 years ago. Or Dolly or Midjourney, these things can create images that only human artists could do, or produce music that only humans could do, or they even speak like us. We're very enamored by how machines are becoming more like humans. One of the things that doesn't get talked about a whole lot is how we're becoming more like machines. If you look at the average vocabulary of people, it's been falling fairly steadily, and that makes sense because we're engaging through keyboards, and your words per minute on a keyboard is just less than you can speak in a like human to human, and you need more efficient communication and more functional communication, and therefore your communication maybe isn't as articulate and in ways that we've valued historically. So, I think one of the things I find interesting is I'm not sure it's good or bad. I think it's just convergence. And what you're having is machines are becoming more like us. We're becoming more like them. Over time, there's going to be some kind of meeting in a way that probably makes it just easier for people to work with machines. And then it's a question of, what do we do together?
Oh, fascinating. That's a good place to leave it. It's a hopeful place, and I'm going to lean into the hope of that last comment, that we can live in harmony with our tech. Um, Rob, thank you so much for your time and your insights. This has been fabulous. And every conversation I have with you, I feel like ends up being not nearly enough, that we could go on for hours, if not days, here on this topic. So thanks again for your insights. And I hope people will pick up your book, Artificially Human, Making Sense of Automation and AI. And if you want to see Rob at our AI K12 Deeper Learning Summit, please contact me, brian.brady411 at gmail.com. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.